Here, this is an organization I have a great fondness for. I love the work you do. I'm involved with your organization quite a bit. I get to speak to a lot of groups, but this is one of the few groups I get to speak to that I can actually talk about my faith. Most places I go, I have to kind of keep that under wraps a little bit. And I'm certainly not going to give you a testimony tonight, but I might have a little bit of my faith kind of show through. You know, I was thinking about what do you say to a group of people who are already engaged in the work? How do you say something to them that might motivate them? Sorry. So what do you say to a group of people who already believe in the mission and they're already making a difference? And I thought long and hard about that. And I've decided to talk a little bit about something that I think is more important than making a difference. And you might say, what could be more important than making a difference? And the answer I have is what I call making a decision. And I really want to talk to you just a little bit about how we go about making decisions, how important making decisions can be to anybody's life. After all, that's the work that you're trying to do in working with at-risk kids. You're trying to get them to make the right decisions. And how do you do that? And what causes people to make the right decisions? So I want to talk to you about three institutions in my life that help me make the right decisions over time. Now, let me give you just a little bit of context. You may have seen, if you read my bio, that like many of the kids that you're trying to help, I grew up in an impoverished background. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. My mother was married when she was 16 and my father was 24. And they waited about 5 years to have children. My oldest brother was born, and then about 4 years after that I was born. And we started out in what seemed to be a fairly normal life, a mother, a father, and 2 children. And everything was going along pretty well. Unfortunately, it turns out that my father had a problem with alcohol. And he started drinking, and he became an alcoholic. And not only an alcoholic, but he became a person that abused my mother. So my brother and I were raised at an early age in a very difficult environment with a father who would abuse my mother. He was an entrepreneur. He sold all of the furniture, sold the house to go into business, and it failed. And so we found ourselves living in an apartment without furniture. I can remember probably the worst night of my entire life when I was about 7 or 8, and I woke up in the middle of the night to find my father abusing my mother, throwing eggs and pots and pans. And I remember my brother and I ran out into the street, and my mother had called her father to come and pick us up. That was kind of the turning point. My mother got a divorce and 4 jobs, and my brother and I were at home, kind of latchkey kids. Somewhat of a difficult environment. We would get behind on rent. We would move out of the apartments, move back into another apartment, then move back into the other apartment. I moved 13 times by the time I was 12 in and out of apartments because we would get behind on the rent. Now, I say all that to you just to give you a context to try to relate to the kids that you're trying to help. So let me tell you about the first institution that helped me start to make good decisions and good choices. The first one was the church. Of all the things that my mother had problems doing, the one thing she made sure of is that she took me to Sunday school and to church every Sunday. So some of my fondest memories about developing my ethics and my values and knowing right from wrong obviously came from church. I still remember the people, the Sunday school teachers, Vacation Bible School, people that would come and visit. It was the greatest outreach to me as a young person, people in the church who cared about me. And I believe it went on to form the foundation of my ethics and my values. It's an interesting experience I had one time. I went to an executive graduate school at Babson College, and I had this professor who was trying to challenge us all as to where our values came from. And he started asking, where does your values come from? And I raised my hand, I said, Sunday school. And of course, you can imagine, he started making fun of me. That's not very sophisticated to think about where your values come from. But the fact of the matter is, I think my values were formed in church, and I think they were formed in Sunday school. 12 or 14, even though I had been involved in church and I had these early foundational pieces laid, I was still drifting and having problems. I was getting in trouble. I was being arrested. I was spending time in juvenile hall. Just a couple of months ago, I had the opportunity to go to the Polk County Detention Center to meet with a young group of young men to speak to them about my experience, and I started mentoring one there. And it was so unusual to go into that detention center and to remember when I was in the detention center, and to be able to relate my own experiences to that. So the second group that really made an influence on me was the Boys and Girls Club of Atlanta, Georgia. When I was about 12 years old, somebody said to me, hey Barry, why don't you come along and go to the Boys and Girls Club? And there was a man there by the name of Charlie Dobbs, who was my first basketball coach, and I think my first mentor. And my, what a difference Charlie made in my life. He was one of those people who first gave me the idea that I could accomplish something and I could be somebody. And he started giving me a vision that I did have support, that I did have something to contribute. And from that experience, I don't know if you can imagine this, but I did play basketball. Most people get that right off. I was pretty good in high school, and I actually went to college on a basketball scholarship. So the second group that influenced me was the Boys and Girls Club, a great institution with a mentor. The third most influential part of my life came from a man by the name of Bill Irwin. Now, Michelle and I, as I said, we started dating when we were 16, and I was still having some wild oats to sow, apparently, even then. And I remember one time when I just got my driver's license, and we were in high school, and we were having an event, and all the kids and their parents were gathered around the drive around, and I just got my driver's license and borrowed a car, and I came screeching through and spun around and almost hit another car. And Michelle's mother looked at her and said, "You see that boy? You're never, ever going to have anything to do with that kid."
She just said I couldn't ride in the car.
You're never going to get in the car with it. Well, boy, what a turnaround. So Michelle and I started dating. We went to college together. We got married 37 years ago. But along the way, the other person who took me under his wing was Michelle's father, Bill Irwin, a Baptist minister. You talk about an influence on a life. Here's a guy who saw a kid who was blowing up his mailbox and was burning things in his yard, was being a totally out of control kid, and said, "I think this kid has some potential." And he started working with me and helping me, and he has counseled me all the way up until the time he passed away a few years ago. A wonderful, wonderful human being. So I think to myself, what would my life be without the church? What would my life be without the Boys and Girls Club? What would my life be without Charlie Dobbs? What would my life be without Bill Irwin? Well, I would probably be in jail. I would probably be in jail. And my last little story is when I was about 12 or 13, I came to know Jesus Christ as my personal Savior in a prison. Not when I was incarcerated, but my stepfather was. So we were going to see my stepfather every Sunday, and I somehow found the Lord in that experience. And I often think about adversity and how troubling it is, but wonder if he hadn't been in prison, I'd never gone there. Wonder if I'd never heard that sermon, if I'd never heard that call, what a different person that I would be. The last part of my story is that Michelle and I got married. Life was good. We moved all over the country. We had success. But I've got to make a confession. It wasn't until about 7 or 8 years ago that I connected the dots. That because I was helped, I've got to help somebody else. Some people called on me at the principal with United Way. And I was giving, I don't know, $10,000 a year as a total giver. And they came to me and said, "Barry, we want you to up your gift to $25,000. And we want you to be the campaign chair of the United Way of Central Iowa." I said, "I tell you what, I'll give you $50,000. Don't make me be the campaign chair." And I think they said, "You can give us the 50, but you got to be the campaign chair." So I became the campaign chair, and I went out in the community and I visited social services agencies like Serve Our Youth. And I began to see what was going on in our community. And I said, "You fool, what have you been doing with your life? Here you are pursuing a career and not taking time to give back." So I want to encourage you in my closing to make a decision. Make a decision to renew your commitment to serve our youth. Make a commitment to support it financially, even more than you do. But most importantly, make a commitment to be involved as a volunteer and a mentor to change the life of one human being. Now, Darren